It all started with 2 chords and a bass line.
So we're writing a musical. This is day one, day dot.
The day was 4th of September 2023. Pacey and I had an idea. That's right, we wanted to write a musical. We've both grown up in our school doing every single musical and play that has come our way, being true theatre kids. Along the way, we faced challenges which led to compromises, but ultimately made a product that was of a musical style. In my time doing musicals at my school, I've grown up being inspired by the greats of contemporary writing today, such as Jason Robert Brown, Pasek and Paul, Lawrence O'Keefe and Nell Benjamin, and even a local writer named Jude Pearl, who we got to actually meet and have an interview with. With all this inspiration in mind, we decided to start writing according to a few goals. Both of us would be composers and we would write an original full-length musical with different characters and a clear creative intent. In our brainstorming, we became attached to the spectacle of a cruise, the story of interwoven characters and storylines in the performance crew of a cruise ship, with a classic MT protagonist, villain, and character arc. We wanted to authentically comment on the significant issue of toxic workplaces in the theatre business, and using this idea of a cruise, we did. We started trying to create. However, as the pressures of Year 12 started to loom in our last days of Year 11, Pacey and I had to make a decision. What would we really be creating? A whole musical? It sounds almost crazy to think about this now after all this time. So we had to make a decision.
Concepts like the whole show so that we understand it, but only write songs for and write script and everything for just a certain part of that plot.
That's right, we were only going to write part of a musical. We had to compromise, something that would become a very large part of working together. Even though we are best friends, Pacey and I could still disagree on things. We adjusted our goals to better fit the time that we had. Hence, our new goal was to write 3 songs for the musical. We went on a trip during the holidays for inspiration and formulated a story of a cruise. We decided here to readjust our goals again. Due to the stresses of Year 12 looming, Pacey wanted to lower the workload even more for the project. Since I had already started working on the writing of a villain song, I suggested I would be the sole composer for the project and Pacey would instead perform the musical. This compromise allowed me to hone in on my own creative intent and also lighten the workload for Pacey, who was a lot less proactive on his approach to the creation that I was. This leads us perfectly to... Using music theatre conventions, I composed songs from parts of the storyline that Pacey and I had concepted. I thought about differences in tone and character and using different musical idioms within the music theatre genre to create clear distinctions between these characters. I will predominantly be using a more contemporary music theatre style, but will also be using other more classical styles as well. My process overall involved the writing of the instrumentals of the songs first, then adding the lyrics and vocal lines over the top, which upon reflection made the process a bit more challenging to connect towards the end, especially when it came to telling a cohesive story through both music and lyrics. I chose instruments that fit for the pieces, involving a string, wind, brass, and with rhythm section. The overture was intended to emulate the grandeur essential to music theatre overtures. The main motif I created for the entire show is played at the beginning, and the opening of the overture is centered around the 2-chord pattern shown on screen. I furthered this main theme by implementing rhythmic interest in fanfare-esque brass figures, snare rolls, and triplet arpeggios. I also wanted to foreshadow the other songs in the show, as that is a key element to musical overtures. So by using key changes, I foreshadowed the ballad I had also created. The opening number was heavily inspired by the works of Jason Robert Brown, having an offbeat hemiola that occurs throughout the song, driving the tempo forward. I made this through the offbeat rhythm on screen. I wanted to articulate the excitement that is a part of embarking on a journey through the Lydian scale, but also convey the irony that Eugene has no clue what he's getting into. Writing a vocal melody to accompany this music was quite a challenge and in hindsight should have been my first step. However, I was able to create this feeling of excitement regardless. For the villain song, I wanted to convey our sly and villainous Giovanni's motives to the audience in a way idiosyncratic to the musical theatre genre, being over the top, exuding confidence and strength. In the song's first part, I used a light jazz-inspired feel to convey the charm he has over the incompetent Captain Buttsworth. I came up with a set of chords, and by using staccato hits and offbeat pickups, I was able to successfully create this feeling of charm and confidence. I further orchestrated this with instruments idiomatic to the jazz sound with muted brass and woodwinds like clarinet and saxophone. I found that it was difficult to incorporate, however, other instruments like oboe and French horn as a part of this song, so I decided to tacit those instruments for the sake of a more authentic sound, an orchestration technique commonly used in musical theatre. The cocktail-style chorus was built upon a descending chromatic line, which is intended for the villain to tap dance to, adding to the sense that he is not exactly menacing, but more of a comedic character. And then the song leads into a more reflective B section. With the ballad, I wanted to convey the melancholy that comes with being separated from one's lover, which is the case for the main characters Eugene and Florence at the end of Act 1. Spoiler alert. I achieved this through basing the harmonic structure of the piece on the oscillation between the 1 chord to the minor 4 chord, and a simple but emotional melody. The oscillation between major and minor creates this melancholic, bittersweet feel, and furthers the story that is transpiring. Ballads in 3 are often used in musical theatre to create expressive, emotional scenes. I found that I struggled with creating convincing and authentic lyrics for the vocal melody for this song. Trying not to sound too camp or cliche was tough. I had to be really careful and deliberate around the choices I made for the lyrics, and how they can tell the story with the music, not in addition to the music. The writing of these songs took months. I worked away at them for a long time, constantly finding new ideas, fixing old ones, and wanting to create more. I became entrenched in this process and found my passion taking me almost too far, to the point where I ended up with too many songs, which we had to cut because of the time constraints we were dealing with. Throughout this process, I continued to send Pacey my work, and he provided ideas or quick fixes when it came to lyrics and notation issues. But when Pacey and I were happy, it was time for the next step in our journey. I was excited for our first rehearsal, as most of it would be me listening to the songs live and making sure that everything was in check in terms of notation. And upon listening to the band play the music live, I realized that some of my writing was not idiomatic to a few instruments, such as the strings. As a saxophonist and a vocalist, I found that their parts were occasionally too high or too low, or I had to notate the score in a way that reflects how I wanted parts to be articulated, like down bows and up bows. I also found that I had written my clarinet parts generally too high, which made me think about my instrumentation and my voicing, and since I needed that soprano voice in the music, it meant that I had to introduce an oboe to fill that voice. I found that conducting was a much more stressful experience than I had anticipated, and I can sympathize with my band conductors. Having to control a group of teenagers was another challenge in itself. Although they are my peers, they often wanted to look over the parts during rehearsals, which could sometimes distract from the larger work that I was doing with the band. Another challenge of this collaboration was working out when I would conduct and when I would play the vital saxophone part with the band. In turn, the rehearsal process allowed me to make my work idiomatic to certain instruments. However, finding times where everyone is available was hard. Just like every great Shakespearean tragedy, this video also has a dilemma in its 4th act. At this point in the process, we've encountered yet another problem. The school year has gotten to a point where everyone is so busy with rehearsals, plays, and school that we cannot find a time to perform our 3 songs to a live audience at night. This means that we decided on a new goal, our final product. We're going to record the band's backing track, then film and record vocals over the top in a more audition tape recording style. After all this lead up, our plan has finally come to fruition. All it needs is to be done. Despite our extensive compromises, Pacey and I were happy with what we achieved, and we believe it stays true to our goals of writing music for musical theatre. Although it may not have been the performance we had in mind, we learned that it was more about the journey we had together, and we were still able to authentically comment on the very real issue of workspace abuse within the theatre industry. Now, without further ado, please enjoy the following excerpts of our songs for Crucicle, the musical.
bet it's gonna be great. I bet it's gonna be huge. My first ever gig is gonna be on a cruise. I can't just sit here. Mom, before you insult me, just wait. That there's a world out there waiting. I bet it's gonna be great. Let's set the scene. Captain Harold Buttsworth, head of the SS Buratino, was looking for the latest and the greatest in showbiz. So naturally, I had to take him up on the offer and steal his money for all that it's worth. I had a contract with a copious amount of fine print that was barely legible to the naked eye, which is now renowned as the world's most illegitimate contract of all time, which would give me full control of his ship. Would you believe he didn't trust me at first? Captain, I completely understand why there's some hesitancy here, but I'm perfectly trustworthy. Listen, I'm the one you call when you need your best. I'm the one you call when you don't know the right from left. I'm the one you call when you're on a cruise, not a shipwreck. Don't judge my ability when you ain't seen jack from me. Boy, you're in for a show. Your captain reap what you sow. We could be friends. We'll make a lot of dough. You call to buy your last beer. I'm the shoulder to cry on with your one last tear. I'm the one you tell all your fears. Got a lot of good in me, so why don't you try trusting me? I can't understand. See it on his face, plan's about to work. I can't wait to run this place. All the money I can dream, just one kill.